So, namaskar friends and welcome once again. We are going to talk about Pratispardhā, that is competition, comparison and collaboration that are integral to modern day organizations. How does the Indian thought reflect on these concepts? Let us begin with one of the examples from the Mahabharata, the eye of the fish. All of you might have come across this story in which there is an archery context and warriors are asked what they perceive before aiming at the rotating fish which is fixed above their head, and they have to look into a bowl full of oil. Most describe the environment, the trees, the sky, the movement. Only Arjuna responds, I see only the eye. He succeeds. This moment is often celebrated as the highest form of concentration, an ideal of disciplined attention. And often parents tell their children the story of Arjuna. If you cultivate that kind of disciplined attention to your goal, you will reach it. Yet philosophically, this narrative invites a more troubling reflection. What must be excluded for such focus to become possible? Well, achieving that goal at what cost, that also has to be found out. We find many students coming to IIT passing the toughest exam in India, but then many of them do it at the cost of their personality development, they do it at the cost of their emotional starvation or the health disturbance. They are good at their subject, but then somehow they fail in their life as they do not understand the fabric of relationships that they have to maintain, the practical aspects of life that are so important. So, Arjuna's success is not merely a product of seeking clearly, it is a result of systematically not seeing everything else. In contemporary context, this dynamic becomes even more pronounced. Competitive structures, examinations, corporate targets, performance metrics, they reward those who can isolate goals with precision. But in doing so, they also cultivate a habit of selective blindness. Such people look at reality selectively. They just look at the thing they want to the exclusion of all other things. This produces a subtle but significant shift. Success is no longer about understanding the whole, but about optimizing for a fragment. Well friends, I am not a very staunch believer in semester system in which we are asked to learn fragmentically. So, you just master a particular fragment and pass that semester and move on. In the next semester you learn something else. There has to be a connect, there has to be a continuous striving. So, the individual becomes highly efficient within a narrow frame, yet increasingly disconnected from broader consequences. So, this raises a deeper concern when perception itself is shaped by competition. Ethics is not simply compromised at the level of action, it is pre-structured at the level of what we are able to notice. One does not ignore ethical questions deliberately, one simply stops seeing them as relevant, and this is a very difficult problem. This is more deeper than it appears to our naked eye. When we stop thinking about anything else, it results in the kind of self-centeredness which does not allow us thinking about the consequences of our actions other than the goals that we want to achieve. If we want to earn money, we only think of money, let it come at whatever cost. The real danger of competition is not that it makes us focus, but that it trains us to see selectively until what lies outside the target no longer appears worthy of attention. And so, it is very restrictive. But what is Pratispardhā? Is it good or is it bad? Pratispardhā is often translated as competition, but it is more accurately understood as relational striving, a movement in which the self situates itself in relation to others. You do not talk about your self-worth. Your self-worth is defined with relation to others, in comparison to others. At one level, this relationality can be productive. It sharpens effort, creates directions and introduces a sense of discipline. One becomes aware not only of one's capacities, but also of the broader field in which those capacities are exercised. Now, this is the positive aspect of Pratispardhā, when it teaches us how to realize our potential and how to learn from others. When the others more performing become a sense of inspiration, not a sense of awe or envy. However, this relational dimension carries an inherent risk. The moment striving becomes anchored in external comparison, it undergoes a subtle but decisive shift from self development to self measurement. It does not remain striving for self development, it becomes a means of self measurement as against the achievements of others. The individual no longer asks what am I becoming, but rather where do I stand. You do not look at your own performance, your own development as individuals, and you start relating every achievement with somebody else, and in comparison you look at your own achievement. Growth is displaced by ranking. Inward refinement is replaced by outward evaluation. In such a framework, the self ceases to be an evolving process and becomes a position within a hierarchy. So, this produces a form of relational dependence. One's sense of worth is no longer internally grounded, but fluctuates with external markers, success, recognition, visibility, comparison. Well, how have you improved? How have you refined your sensibility? What have you achieved? It all looks either big or small in comparison to others, and so it does not remain stable. This makes identity inherently unstable. It rises and falls not with one's development, but with the performance of others. Let us say you earn 2 lakh rupees per month and somebody else earns 2,25,000 per month. You suddenly start looking at your 2 lakh and finding it less. If you just concentrate on your achievement, probably you will find it more than enough. So, in contemporary life, this dynamic is intensified through systems that constantly quantify and display performance. Well, friends, recently the board results have come and the papers are full of different schools showing their might, showing the performance of their students and making comparisons that in other schools this many people have scored a perfect 100 percentile, in our school this many people have done it. So, it becomes a marker of their greatness. So, these do not merely reflect competition, they institutionalize comparison, making it continuous and unavoidable. The deeper ethical concern is that such a system transforms not only how we act, but how we experience ourselves. When worth is relationally determined, autonomy weakens. We no longer remain our own selves. We are what we are in relation to others, in comparison to others. One may appear driven and successful, yet remain internally dependent on external validation. Let us say you became something in 5 years and are enjoying your life, thinking that you are successful, and suddenly you come to know about another friend of yours or classmate of yours who has risen more than you in the hierarchy, and suddenly your own position looks small compared to that of his. So, the danger of Pratispardhā is not that it places us in relation to others, but that it can make our very sense of self contingent upon that relationship. When this results in dissatisfaction, knowing that somebody else has taken over you, you cease to realize and enjoy your own success, and this is something that is quite unsettling. Comparison, that is the invisible beginning of competition. Competition often begins in the mind as comparison. One does not simply act, one measures. This quiet internalization transforms identity into something fundamentally unstable. One is never simply capable, but always better or worse than someone else. The life of Karna offers a powerful illustration of this dynamic. As in the Mahabharata, Karna's extraordinary skill and perseverance are undeniable, yet his identity remains persistently entangled with Arjuna. His striving is not only toward excellence, but towards surpassing a specific other. This comparison is not externally imposed alone, it becomes internalized, shaping his sense of self, his alliances, and even his ethical choices. So, he is a great warrior, but he wants to be greater than Arjuna, and that is what makes him make all his choices, although unethical, in his life. His resentment, his loyalty to Duryodhana, and persistent need for recognition, they are all in part responses to a relationally wounded identity. This is what makes comparison ethically complex. It does not merely motivate effort, it can distort judgment. Also, the desire to resolve comparison through victory, recognition, or validation arises. In such a condition, even achievement fails to stabilize identity because the comparison itself never ends. So, indulging in such never ending comparison not only affects our moral sanity, it also affects our ability for self refinement and self improvement. Now, excellence versus winning, a lost ethical distinction. Indian thought repeatedly distinguishes between sādhana, that is the disciplined inward process of self cultivation, and victory, which is an outward comparative outcome. Excellence in Indian sense is not dependent on defeating another, it is rooted in the refinement of the self. So, how we better ourselves, we cultivate excellence in ourselves is important, not its visible comparison with others. Continuity of effort and alignment with a deeper purpose. Winning by contrast is contingent. It exists only in relation to others and is validated through comparison. When excellence is equated with winning, the entire meaning of effort shifts. The process is no longer valuable in itself, it becomes merely a means to secure an outcome. One of the better examples may be the T20 games of cricket, where the skill, obviously the skill set of a different kind is needed, but the more than the processes, the results matter, and that is why the same set of cricketers who become successful in T20, when they come to test cricket, they find it difficult. Why? Because it requires excellence as a process. Failure, instead of being formative, becomes stigmatized, something to be avoided, hidden or bypassed. When outcomes become the primary measure, the methods used to achieve them become negotiable. Integrity, patience and depth, qualities central to sadhana, begin to appear inefficient. Everybody is in a hurry. This creates a culture where shortcuts, strategic compliance and ethical compromise are not seen as failures, but as adaptations to a system that rewards results above all else. Collaboration, that is again another word that is used quite often in our contemporary world as well. If competition isolates and comparison destabilizes, collaboration offers a fundamentally different ethical orientation. It reframes a striving as shared growth rather than individual dominance. It does not eliminate excellence, instead it redistributes it across relationships, making progress collective rather than comparative. But does it happen the way we perceive it to be? Collaboration is structurally fragile. It depends on trust, openness and a willingness to allow others to grow alongside oneself. Competitive systems, however, often undermine precisely these conditions. When success is scarce and visibility is limited, helping another can appear as diminishing one's own chances. Now, the sense of competition still remains in collaborations. So, even if we are collaborating with others, we are not trusting them, or we are always afraid that somebody else will take more credit and we will get less credit. The Mahabharata offers a compelling counterpoint through the relationship among the Pandavas. Despite their individual strengths, Bhima's physical power, Arjuna's archery skills, Yudhishthira's sense of judgment, their survival and success depend not on internal rivalry, but on coordinated interdependence. They do not compare each other, rather they collaborate with each other. So, their strengths do not cancel each other, they complement and stabilize the group. So, collaboration means identifying your respective strengths and your willingness to contribute to the final goal without undermining the strengths and contributions of others. This stands in contrast to highly competitive frameworks where individuals are compelled to view others as obstacles rather than collaborators. The ethical cost of such a mindset is significant. It erodes the possibility of trust, fragments collective effort and reduces relationships to instrumental exchanges. At the same time, collaboration is not inherently pure. It can mask dependency, uneven contribution or even hidden hierarchies. Thus, the challenge is not to idealize collaboration, but to sustain it consciously in environments that discourage it. So, in contemporary context, dear friends, workplaces, academic spaces, professional networks, the tension is evident. Collaboration is often encouraged rhetorically, but structurally undermined by competitive evaluation systems. We send our papers for publication and many of our papers are collaborative, but then the publishers ask us to quantify our extent of participation rather than believing that this whole work has come out as a process of collective collaboration. This itself has an inherent tendency to believe that some people who have contributed 60% and some people who have contributed 30%, the 60% person has to be privileged over the 30%. This creates a contradiction. Individuals are expected to work together, yet are ultimately judged against each other. The competition does not merely organize effort, it reconfigures our experience of time. Under competitive pressure, time is no longer lived as a process of unfolding, but as a resource to be compressed, optimized and accelerated. So, competition does not allow us any kind of comfort of reflective thought. We are all running and rushing in order to take over the other. So, the success must be immediate, visible and continuous. There is little room for pause, reflection or gradual maturation. This stands in sharp contrast to the ethical imagination of growth found in our Indian thought system, where development is understood as inherently gradual, layered and often imperceptible in the moment. In the Bhagavad Gita, we are told, Neha bhi karmanaso asti pratvayo na vidyate. That means, in this path no effort is ever lost, nor is there any harm in delay. This verse affirms that progress is not linear or immediate. It accumulates quietly without the anxiety of instant results. Growth here is not measured through urgency, but through continuity of effort over time. So, in the long run friends, the growth is about the processes, about the continuity, about the perseverance, about the persistence, about the channelized effort, constant effort. It is not a one of kind that you desire it, get it and sustain it. If you get it that way, it will go that way. Modern competitive systems invert this logic. They reward speed over depth, output over understanding and visibility over internal development. Learning becomes hurried, failure becomes intolerable and patience appears inefficient. This produces what may be called temporal anxiety, a condition where individuals feel perpetually behind regardless of their actual progress. This compression of time has ethical consequences. When everything must happen quickly, there is little space for careful judgment, for reconsideration or for acknowledging complexity. Decisions become reactive rather than reflective. The deeper loss is not just of patience, but of ripening. The decisions are taken hurriedly, leaving no space for maturity. The slow formation of understanding, character and insight. Without this temporal depth, individual may achieve success, but without the grounding that makes success meaningful or sustainable. Of course, you can make progress without insight, without character, without slow process of understanding, but then the question remains whether this kind of achievement will be sustainable or meaningful. The crisis of competition is not only that it demands success, it is that it demands it too quickly, leaving no time for the self to grow into what it achieves. Now, the question comes, can competition be ethical, or do we need to look beyond Pratispardhā? For competition to remain meaningful rather than corrosive, it would require a fundamental shift, valuing process alongside outcome, resisting the constant pull of comparison and sustaining a sense of responsibility toward others even within rivalry. If we learn to do this, probably we can nullify the ill effects of competition. In this sense, ethical competition is not about eliminating striving, but about ensuring that striving does not come at the cost of integrity, relationship or inner stability. We want to gain success, we want to make progress, but we never ever compromise the processes or contingent ethical considerations for that to happen. To recognize another's excellence without experiencing it as a threat reflects an inner stability that competition tends to erode. The inability to appreciate often signals a deeper insecurity, where the success of others diminishes one's own sense of worth. So, if we learn to appreciate others, to acknowledge their successes without any inhibitions or ill will, and in the process should also acknowledge our own worth and potential and put everything is in the right perspective, our competition will turn out to be ethical rather than unethical. By contrast, the ability to acknowledge and even admire a competitor's strength indicates a freedom from inferiority driven comparison. At a deeper level, competition, comparison and collaboration are not separate domains. They are interwoven modes through which we relate to ourselves and to others. When competition becomes dominant, comparison intensifies and collaboration weakens. Relationships shift from mutuality to measurement and growth becomes indistinguishable from victory. The challenge therefore is not to reject competition altogether, friends, but to prevent it from becoming the sole framework through which human worth is understood. If we start measuring all our development, all our achievements in comparison to the achievements of others, probably we will never enjoy our own successes. So, the deepest ethical question is not whether we succeed in competition, but whether in the process we retain the ability to appreciate others without insecurity, to relate without constant comparison and to grow without needing to defeat. So, this turns out to be a fair, positive competition. So, this is all, friends. Thank you very much for your kind attention. I believe this discussion on comparison, competition and collaboration has given us an insight to learn how to maintain a balance between competition, comparison and collaboration. So, thank you very much.